State lawmakers have passed a pair of bills designed to help alleviate Arizona's housing shortage. One of those bills has the support of municipalities around the state. The other, not so much. Joining us now is Jeremy Duda, who's been reporting on the story for Axios Phoenix. Jeremy, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's start, just in general, now these are bills that deal with municipalities of over 75,000, so not for smaller towns, correct?
Only cities of 75,000 or more, which I believe is 15 cities.
Okay, and it deals with ADUs and middle housing. Let's define terms here. What's an ADU?
ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit, which most people probably know as a casita or a mother-in-law house, just usually a detached unit on the property. It's smaller than the house, but big enough to live in. The bill would require cities, the larger cities, to allow those, to allow two actually, a detached one and an attached one. And then middle housing is a term which I'd never heard before this legislation either, but this describes things like duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, smaller units that are adjoined that are cheaper than an actual single family home.
Back to the ADUs, sounds like a guest house, true?
Yeah, guest house, something to that effect, yeah.
There's concern here because of short-term rentals. And I know that the League of Cities and Towns and a lot of municipalities around the state not happy. Did the bill not address short-term rentals?
It did, but not in the way that cities wanted to hear. What the problem here is that the bill ostensibly is the purpose of it, with the intent of it, is to alleviate this massive housing shortage that we have here in Arizona, and to do that, at least in part, by letting more people build these ADUs, these casitas, guest houses, whatever you want to call them, so people can rent them out as places to live. Now, the cities are concerned that what people are going to end up doing is building them and then just renting them out for short-term rentals, for Airbnb or whatever. And then you not only you create all this new housing stock and then you take it out of circulation by just letting people on vacation rent it. And the cities, they wanted a provision in the bill that allowed them, that gave them, not just allowed them, but maintained the right that they have now to ban new ADUs from being used as short-term rentals, which a handful of cities already have. It does not have that. The one change they made to try and kind of a partial compromise on the issue was that for new ADUs, in order to be used as short-term rentals, the homes have to be owner-occupied. So you can build one in your yard, and if you are living there, you can rent that out, and that kind of ensures, I think, that people have some skin in the game, that they have a stake in these not becoming wild party houses with massive noise problems. And that is not what the city wanted to hear, and that amendment actually had the effect of invalidating these other cities like Phoenix and Tucson that have these restrictions already.
So with that in mind, the governor, what's she going to do with this?
That's hard to say. When the governor vetoed another housing bill a couple months ago, she very explicitly said in her veto letter, I want to see lawmakers and cities get together and compromise and agree on legislation on ADUs and middle housing. Send me bills on those two things. But so on one hand, it's kind of difficult to see her vetoing this after she called for lawmakers to send this to her. On the other hand, she did call for a compromise, and we do not have an agreement from the two sides.
Why not just say you can't have a short-term rental here? What is the argument against that?
We spoke with Ana Hernandez, who's one of the Democratic senator, who's one of the leading proponents of this. She had some legislation on the issue as well. She wants people to be able to use, families to be able to use that as extra income. Same for the Republican sponsor of the bill, Michael Carbone. They want people to maintain that right that they have now. A lot of interest in property rights. People who already have ADUs can use these for that. And you can't take that right away because we have some pretty strong property rights protections in Arizona. But for new ones, you could. But they want people to maintain that right to be able to do that moving forward.
Okay, now the middle housing bill, again, middle housing on single-family zoned lots. And triplexes, duplexes, townhomes, these sorts of things.
Yeah, and this would force cities of 75,000 people or more to allow these, but in limited circumstances. Originally, I believe the bill would have allowed that pretty much anywhere. And what the amendment that was part of this compromise says, you could only have to allow them within 1 mile of what the city's downtown or central business district, or in larger housing developments of 10 acres or more. At least 20, in those situations, at least 20% of the land, I believe, has to be set. You have to permit middle housing on at least 20% of those developments.
So again, if you're within a mile of the central city core You have to allow these things?
You do, on lots zoned for single-family homes, yes.
If you're away from that, though, you got to have a property of what, 10 acres? What was, how much?
If it's a development of 10 acres or more, then you have to allow, then at least 20% has to permit, middle housing.
And the League of Cities and Towns and Municipalities, they're okay with that one.
They're okay with that one. The amendment, the compromise that passed muster with them, they're not opposing that. I have a hard time seeing, the governor not signing that, given that there's not a lot of opposition. The main opposition to a lot of these bills has been the League of Cities and the cities they represent. Now that kind of everyone's on board, it's difficult to see a scenario where she vetoes that.
Timetable? I mean, again, she's got to do this pretty quick, doesn't she?
She does. She has 5 days, I think not including Sundays, from when it's passed during session to sign or veto. Tomorrow, Tuesday, is the deadline for that. So we will see, unless something happens today, which I don't expect, we will see some action on that tomorrow.
The governor did veto a starter home bill earlier in this session. Is that still bubbling around? Are people trying to work through the veto and work with the governor's office and figure out what they want and get something going here?
They are. After the governor vetoed that bill, she kind of brokered some negotiations between the cities, lawmakers, other home builders, other stakeholders, neighborhood groups, saying she wanted some people to talk out these bills, and we ended up with the ADU and middle housing stuff. But there's still been no agreement on the starter homes bill, which would severely restrict some cities' zoning ability to impose some zoning requirements in some situations, lower lot sizes, smaller houses, and we have not seen agreement on this. And I know the lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who are advocating for this are still trying to work something out. We have not seen anything yet. I have not heard anyone getting even any close to this so far. So that's going to be a bit of a heavier lift. I don't know if we're actually going to see something on that this session, but they are still talking as far as I know. Does
the starter home bill lose any revived nature of the starter home bill? Would that lose a lot of steam if either one of these other two bills is signed by the governor?
I think it would be definitely easier for the governor and others to say, oh, we already have these two bills. We'll see if that helps out, and then we can come back and revisit this next year.
All of these ideas here, are they really going to make a difference with the housing shortage?
I mean, they could chip away at it a little. It's such a deeply entrenched problem that there's so little, not enough housing stock, and what's out there is so, prohibitively expensive for most people that this will probably help. Will it be the grand solution to anything? Absolutely not. But it could, at least on the margins, kind of help create some cheaper housing that will help folks who are having trouble finding affordable housing now.
Interesting. Jeremy Duda, Axios Phoenix. Jeremy, always a pleasure. Thanks, sir.
Thanks for having me.